So the Deadpool sequel is apparently in some kind of development trouble. Something to do with creative differences and whatnot. So what I want to talk about is everything we know about it at this point, as well as the backstory of how the hell we managed to get a successful first movie initially, a little bit of speculation about what's next, and at the end, as always, I'll be giving away a loot crate. All this and more in this week's episode of the video I make every Sunday. They don't actually have a name. Jesus, I mean, it probably should have been doing this long enough. You know what? I'll think about it, and by that I mean, I'll give it no more thought. Okay, so Deadpool was a movie that had been in the works in one form or another for longer than you may initially think. All the way back to the year 2000. What a time to be alive. So many classic memories of hairstyles that are really terrible in hindsight. It was around this time that things were really gearing up for comic book movies, and because of this, Artisan brokered a deal with Marvel, giving them the rights to make 15 projects in total, including Thor, Ant-Man, Power Pack, and Captain America. Man, can you imagine an early 2000s version of Captain America? That movie would have made probably no money, but it would have been hilarious. Anyways, among the various properties sat Deadpool, and that's pretty much all it did. Sat. At some point, the project jumped over to New Line with David Goyer writing a draft, the same year he directed Blade, The Worst Blade. He loved working with Ryan Reynolds on Blade, The Worst Blade, and very much wanted him to take on the role. According to Goyer, Reynolds wasn't convinced he was able to convey believability as an action star, but Goyer convinced him after cutting together some early footage. This coincided with the 2004 issue of Cable and Deadpool that makes reference to Reynolds specifically, noting that he, the character, looked like the actor crossed with a Shar-Pei. This apparently piqued Reynolds' interest also, and he officially came on board for the project. This version wasn't to connect with the Weapon X program at this point, as all that was still tied into the X-Men universe that resided with Fox. And in the end, Goyer lost interest, perhaps due to his heavy involvement in the Dark Knight trilogy, or maybe because Blade, The Worst Blade, wasn't well received. Still, according to Patton Oswalt, Goyer isn't really to blame for that, and Wesley Snipes is an insane person.
He is, he's crazy as a soup sandwich. Wouldn't answer to anything but the name Blade. And he would only, he tried to strangle the director one day.
Alright, so things shifted over to Fox, and Reynolds put himself at the forefront of getting things going. But then along came a little movie called X-Men Origins Wolverine that just ruined a bunch of shit. It's such a terrible movie on every level, and this was partly because of the writer's strike at the time, and not just the Fox executives meddling. Apparently in the script for all of Wade Wilson's scenes, it just read, Deadpool shows up and talks fast. And as a result, Reynolds wrote or improvised a lot of the dialogue himself. Then the studio made the astounding decision to sew the character's mouth shut and have him shoot lasers out of his eyes and have blades coming out of his arms, you know, like that guy in Mortal Kombat 2, whose name I can't remember. Wait, I just remembered as I'm writing this, it's Baraka. Let's not edit around that, let's just keep moving forward. Reynolds didn't want to be involved in this version of the character, but the studio basically told him, well look, this movie is happening regardless, and we'll just recast you if we have to. We don't care. Your last movie was Chaos Theory, and if we're honest, we have no idea what that was, but presumably, it didn't do super well. Anyways, we know you're gonna do it, just sign. So Reynolds obviously did, but told the studio that yeah, a lot of the decisions that were made on a creative level were terrible, and people were gonna hate it.
And I remember telling one of the studio execs, I said, you guys are people are gonna go nuts over this, and he was like, I know, right? And I was like, no, not in a good way.
No, nuts.
No,
People went insane.
The Deadpool character, you can't do this to the Deadpool character. And they just said, it'll work, watch.
In fact, he doesn't even appear as Deadpool for much of the final act. It's actor/martial artist Scott Adkins. They tried to get Reynolds back to reshoot a bunch of his stuff, but at this point he was onto the proposal and was unavailable. Plus the movie was probably unfixable at this point anyways, so who cares? In 2010, despite Fox's lack of faith in the Deadpool character, because he wasn't well received, despite that being almost entirely their own fault, reluctantly things were moving forward, with Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick hired to pen the project. The first draft of that was promptly leaked about a month later. Probably deliberately. I mean, the Deadpool movie has a bit of a history with that. The fan response, though, was very positive, which meant that Fox put up a small amount of money for some test footage. Robert Rodriguez was courted to direct, but negotiations fell through, so Tim Miller was hired in 2011. His production company, Blur Studio, the people responsible for a lot of the Batman Arkham trailers, created the test footage using Ryan Reynolds in mocap. And then nothing happened for about 4 years or so. According to Miller, they'd go in occasionally to work on some stuff, but nothing substantial. That is until the footage was leaked in 2014. Who leaked it? It's impossible to say for sure.
I know that one of us did it.
Like, there's four of us. There's me, Rhett Reese, Paul Wernick, and Tim Miller, the director. One of us did it.
Okay, good. Yeah, all right, good. Yeah, I don't know who did it. Yeah.
We all sort of said at the beginning, someone should leak it. Someone should leak it. So the idea was planted, but I'm 70% sure it wasn't me.
But yeah, it was Miller. All sources point to him, and he definitely did it, although it's unlikely that he'll admit it anytime soon, but it was him, and if you say it wasn't, well, you're wrong. So from there, the positive fan reaction kind of forced Fox's hand, and they reluctantly greenlit it on a limited budget. It's safe to say that they had next to no faith in the project, and were completely blindsided by the positive critical and commercial response. Deadpool is now the highest grossing R-rated movie ever, of all time. It even managed to top that movie where Jesus got beaten to death for 4 hours, and that drew quite a crowd, both cinematically and presumably at the time. Plus, it's the highest grossing X-Men film, and it's not even really an X-Men movie. This movie arrived at the exact right point in time, and it was the perfect storm of making fun of the superhero genre when people had a good understanding of a bunch of superhero tropes, mixed with decent action, humor, and a stellar marketing campaign. Also, I think there were a significant amount of people tricked into seeing this, believing it was some kind of spiritual sequel to Definitely Maybe. And this pretty much brings us up to where we are today, and the status of Deadpool 2. Now, despite multiple articles from multiple supposed inside sources, there's a lot we don't know about what has happened internally. But I think it's fairly safe to say at this point that it probably isn't Fox's fault. I know that's kind of hard to believe considering the company they are and continue to be, and I'm sure they played some minor part in backing Ryan Reynolds, but all we really know for sure is that Tim Miller, despite having been signed onto the sequel, is no longer with the project. Looking back, there were actually warning signs that came attached to the release of Deadpool on Blu-ray. The commentary track is Ryan Reynolds, Rhett Reese, and Paul Wernick. No director, which is odd. Rumors have surfaced that Reynolds and Miller hadn't spoken for months after the completion of the film, and looking back, I couldn't find any interviews from the February Deadpool press junket where they are sitting together. That's not entirely uncommon, however, for an actor and a director to be interviewed separately. Okay, so one insider source claims that Miller wanted a budget that expanded to 3 times that of the original film. Now, I have no insider sources. I consider myself the everyman, one of the common folk. A real Joe Blow, but not from that huge website, but the original meaning. So with that being made clear, my personal opinion is I don't really feel this report lines up with Miller as a director. And some other more reputable publications feel the same way. Because this is what he had to say about making a sequel back in February.
So anyway, I don't look at Deadpool and go, oh, it's a perfect movie. I look at it and go, oh my God, there's so much stuff I could do better. What you don't want to do is do all the stupid stuff like, oh my God, it's got to be twice as big because now people are going to be bored, or oh my God, it's going to have 3 times the villains, or it's stupid.
So yeah, do you see what I'm saying? He doesn't really seem to be the kind of guy who will completely blow out a budget. He even said later in the interview something along the lines of, nothing great has ever been made on unlimited time and money. I do believe though that he wanted to make a different kind of movie, more stylized, as one report claimed. Reynolds, Reese, and Wernick wanted something more in the vein of the first, apparently scrappy, raunchy, and inexpensive. When you look at it logically, if anyone was going to give in, it would have had to have been Miller. When it comes down to it, Ryan Reynolds is the face of the character. He can't really be replaced. But with Miller being the man behind the curtain, he absolutely could. It's like when they replace the drummer of a band, most people don't notice. And I don't mean any disrespect to any drummers watching this. I love what you do. Keep bloody banging away. But take U2 for example. They've been through 15 drummers since they formed in 1976. And here's the thing, that's not even true. But it might be. I don't care. Another contentious issue is that there were clashes over the casting of Cable, the time-traveling cyborg man that we were promised would show up in the sequel. Miller apparently wanted Kyle Chandler. Now that does seem a little left of center, but I think he had a very specific version of Cable in mind. In fact, he talked about this exact version earlier this year.
Because you can play Cable a couple of different ways, you know. You can play him as the humorless super soldier from the future who's grim and never smiles, or you could play him as sort of the Messiah who wants to save mankind. And that's kind of a different tone, and I think that would affect who I might cast. If I want somebody who is grim, a grim badass, or if I want somebody who's ultimately could be seen as a savior of humanity.
Does all this mean that the movie is doomed? Definitely. Nah, not really, it's too early to tell. And you should also bear in mind that this video comes from a guy who made a previous video about how all the ways Fox would ruin the first Deadpool. So what the hell would I know? I do think, however, that Miller is a massive loss. And frankly, what I personally liked least about Deadpool was a lot of the crass humor. Now, this doesn't offend my delicate sensibilities, it's fine. It's just a personal preference. It can totally work. But I just think a guy yelling, hey, look at my dick for 2 hours wouldn't make a funny movie. And I think Miller brought a balance to the project. Plus he has an eye for action and scope, which it seems is something that he wanted to expand on in the sequel. And I'm concerned now that we're just going to get more of the same. But you know what? It'll probably be fine. I don't know. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. The world will keep on spinning until something horrendous happens, like an asteroid knocks us out of the sun's orbit and we drift off into the blackness of space and all freeze to death. Alright, let's give away a loot crate. If you are this person, congratulations. Just private message me these details on my channel and it's all yours. And if you want to win next week's box, leave any comment below. Maybe on what you'd like to see in a Deadpool sequel, whether it be casting, storyline, characters, whatever you want. Also, if you're keen, I have a podcast called The Weekly Planet, where we talk movies, comics, TV shows. That's linked below if you're interested. And if you're not interested, that's totally understandable. But at the same time, come on, man, just give it, why don't you give it a shot? The worst that can happen is that I've secretly installed a virus into the MP3 file, and then you download it, and that causes your phone to burst into flames in your pocket. But there's a pretty good chance that I didn't do that. Alright, thanks for watching. Take care.